بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تبع هداه. السادة الحضور, in behalf of Ministry of Culture and Sport, allow me to welcome and introduce Brother Shabir Yusuf. Very interesting, multi-talented personality. Engineer, scientist, entrepreneur, teacher with Islamic knowledge, and overall he is a well-known person and expert in religious, scientific, logical argumentation and debate. His knowledge in this particular issue actually is vast, and he passed through a huge experience in debating around these topics. We have atheism, we have all kinds of religious beliefs and non-religious beliefs all around the world. And we are actually, we cannot wait actually to listen and hear from his side, his experience, and what he can tell us about this argumentation and what's behind it of logic and science. Inshallah. The floor is yours, and you have 45 minutes.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, sure.
All right.
I can hear you well.
Excellent.
Your voice is clear and well heard actually. So the floor is yours.
Excellent. Alhamdulillah. First of all, I must thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to be able to speak to you. One of the things that I always say, that any time a door is opened, it is through the will of the Creator, and it would be for a very good reason. Now, one of the things that I have always found is that and I'm going to talk about this whole issue from the perspective of being a Muslim and nothing else. Now, one of the things that I have found as a Muslim is that no matter how many kinds of issues we come across in life, there has to be a particular solution, which may be multifaceted, but we will always have a solution. And as a Muslim, we have always been informed from the Quranic discourse that any solution that we seek, it is to be found in the guidance that has been provided to us. Now, one of the things that I found, through my journey, as it were, was that the method of thinking that we have to think about every word that we are going to employ and what that word means and what its origin was. This method actually allows us to truly understand when we are given guidance, when it says the first thing is the niyyah, the intent. What is the intention behind the solution? That itself is going to make you understand what appropriate word to use. So just as an example, before I tell you a brief history of how I came to this, one of the things we find as human beings is that when I say hello, if everybody is accustomed to the word hello, they will automatically know what I mean. However, if that very same word is used in a particular emotive manner, so for example, I say sternly, hello, or I say hello, automatically the brain starts thinking differently, although the word is the same. So part and parcel of the process of looking at life, my view was, what does the Quran actually say about a certain thing? And when it does, what is it trying to say? And why is it saying it the way it is saying it? Also bearing in mind that the guidance that came down, I'm using only about the Quran at the moment, when the guidance came down, it did not come down in a vacuum. There had to be a reason or a multiplicity of reasons for why a particular statement of guidance came down. So The next step that unfortunately or fortunately, whichever way you want to look at it, the next step for me was to work out, wait a minute, if we were to say that we can develop a mindset, so whether it is philosophy, and we will usually talk about in the Western world about Greek philosophy and how it actually covered most of the Western world. And even up to now, there are so many facets of Greek philosophy that we actually rely on. But the issue then for me became, okay, I can think of the words that have been employed in the Quran, but why have they been employed in the manner that they have been employed? Not only that, as a further question arose for me, why should an absolute entity provide guidance which by definition would be absolute in its origin, and that guidance then has to be taken down and applied in a limited capacity? So the natural next step was, wait a minute, if I'm going to think like everybody else, and I'm going to be saying certain things which inshallah, hopefully we can come back on, yeah, the first thing that I realized was the usage of the word religion, and how we are also accustomed to comparing religion with another religion. So we will have people commonly say, oh, I belong to the religion of Islam. The other person will say, I belong to the religion of Christianity. I belong to the religion of this, that, and the other. And to me, I started thinking about this, and I thought, wait a minute, if the creator is one, then by definition, anything that is going to emanate from him is going to lead to what we would call a unity. And if that be the case, then logically speaking, if you take it reasonably, the mind will only tell you one thing, that if we had one creator sending a message across, then by definition, anyone who represented that message would automatically be part and parcel of the same source. And if that be the case, then only logically speaking, you would come to the conclusion that the creator is one, the message logically will be one. If there were a multitude of individuals who represented the message, then they were all part of what we would in conventional terms call the people who were part of the company, as it were. But the representation was for that one source. Now, that led me to start thinking about how there is, if there is a potential difference between Islam being seen the way it is and everything else other than Islam. Now, the first thing that I started thinking about was there is another narrative, and that other narrative is what we call the scientific narrative. And again, my brothers and sisters, I realized, wait a minute, if there is this idea about science, the way it is understood today, it has created itself to be something unique and something specific. Whereas when I started looking at what Islam or the Quran actually says, it was showing me a uniform approach. And what I mean by that is when, for example, an ayah in the Quran talks about a natural phenomena, why should it be considered to be a religious statement as opposed to what we consider to be a scientific statement? Where lies the distinction? And on what basis has that distinction been made? Well, when I took it a bit further, I realized the distinction was actually made, for me anyway, from what I have understood, the distinction was made for a particular reason, which I will touch on just before I finish. However, for me, any ayah of the Quran is meant to be guidance for humanity on this planet. whether that particular guidance has an extension which goes into what we would call the supernatural realm is a different issue. However, the question that arose is that any statement that the Quran has made, which can be clearly seen to be one considering natural phenomena, then by definition, it should be considered scientific, the way the word science is understood today. Now, I took that a step further and I realized even the word science has its origin. And when we look at the word itself, you find that in its original inception, the word actually just meant knowledge. And if that be the case, then it is only logical to appreciate and understand why the Quran has mentioned many, many things which today we would consider to be scientific. However, there are many Muslims who will say, well, look, we would rather say that the Quran is not a scientific book, but my view is not that. My view is, look, if you have got information which has been provided by the one who created everything, then the creator, in all the wisdom that the creator possesses, would provide information the way it is best suited for us, because it is guidance. It would not make sense to provide guidance which cannot be understood. So step one for me was the realization that, look, there seems to be a distinct element contained within Islam which is not present in other places. However, that does not mean that those other things must be dismissed wholesale. No. So the first step I realized was that, look, there is something distinct, but what is it that is distinct? That took me to the second stage where I started appreciating and looking at all the information available in a different light. What I mean by that is that when I saw something, for example, we have got biogenesis, the very idea of where life and how life arose. So if we are going to take that as an example, it has become a science on its own, which again has been separated from what is considered to be the theory of evolution. That is our understanding of how life progressed in general terms. However, the question arose for me, why should you make a distinction between the two? Is it because we are trying to understand that the amount of information for each subject matter is so vast that it is better to separate it? If that be the case, there is no issue. However, there has to be a connecting strand between the two, because you can't just treat one on its own unless and until there is some kind of connector to the second stage. Again, when I am looking at it, I notice one thing, that the Quran is talking about the phenomena. It is talking in different places. However, it is not the way I am viewing it. It is not divorced wholesale from any other subject matter. So, logically speaking, it seemed very clear to me that any subject matter that is being considered by human beings has, by definition, its source from the creator. And if it does have the source, the creator being the source, and we know it is, yes, and I'm talking on an evidential basis, if that be the case, then it only makes sense that everything, every aspect of knowledge that we will learn about will have connective elements to it to make it one whole subject. And that subject would be conducive to the welfare of human beings. Now, to break that down, I then had to take a third step. And I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute, it is easy for me to say, I believe. Very easy for any human being to say, we believe. But what does the word actually mean? Does it mean that I can say, I believe in, something that is impossible, but I consider it to be possible? And does that make it a valid belief? So, for example, if I were to say, it's not a problem, I believe I can fly from a 10th story building by myself without any external aids. If I say this to anybody, people who have experimented the fact that as soon as you throw something, it comes crashing down on earth, the same thing will happen to me. That led me to the next stage, that being of evidence. And the question that arose is, where should evidence be placed? Should it be placed before I believe or after I believe? And if I believe, then I look at the evidence to suit what I believe, even if that evidence leads me to the conclusion that what I believe is not necessarily correct. So again, the issue arises as to what the evidence is, where that evidence should be placed. And a third more important aspect came into play, that being, once I have got that information, am I able to establish the source of that information? Was it what we would consider to be objective information, or was it information that was passed down through a method which, when reassessed, may not have been as effective as it ought to have been? So that stage then comes along. Evidence now has to be considered, and evidence must always be seen as something that is independent of whatever the belief may be. If we want to seek a solution or an answer to something, then we must look at all the available evidence that is within our power to accrue. But that is so important, which leads to the next stage that I was going through. And I realized that the evidence has to precede even my belief, whatever it is. I'm sure if you have seen any of my videos, I'm very uncomfortable with the word religion and the word belief, because it means different things to different people. So I then realized evidence is primary. And the fact that there are suggestions very clearly in the Quran which asks us to consider evidence to reach a logical and reasonable conclusion, it meant that evidence primarily must be the focal point, and the evidence should lead you to the conclusion after which you should come to what you would consider to be a certain answer, and thereafter it becomes a belief, the way the word belief is understood. Now, the 3 or 4 steps later, I then realized that the information that we possess right now, and it's what I would consider only an interpretation of that information, has been primarily over the past 200-300 years, has been primarily from what we would consider the Western world, going through from Greek philosophy, although that started thousands of years ago. Yes, but the primary elements that we are considering, for example, if we look at psychology, sociology, any of those, what I would call mind subjects or brain subjects, are based on the understanding of many, what we would call great scientists in the Western world, whether it's Sigmund Freud or any others. However, that next stage then came through for me to come to the realization that if, for example, we have an understanding that suggests to us something that may directly contradict or may clearly be opposing something that is contained within the Quran, what would our position be? That now led me to another stage of how I arrived at the way I actually conduct myself in terms of discussions. It meant then we have to look at every aspect, compare it, if we can, to what the guidance actually states, and see whether there is any meeting line Or is there something that can actually be corrected and improved on? Now, my submission is, from the way I'm seeing things, there is so much that can actually be added to the subject matters that are already available. It is but an initiation that is required. And to me, if you look at certain information, I'm sure any of the students in psychology would know about psychoanalysis. They would know, I'm just using this example because it goes to the root of the way we think. Yeah, you look at psychoanalysis, you will see about the Oedipal complex, etc. And you find that there seems to be something not entirely fitting with the way the guidance is addressing certain things. So that now took me to a final stage. That stage being, one, what must I, as an individual who considers myself to be a Muslim, what must I use as the yardstick, which is reasonable, which is logical, which is rational, by which I can actually measure any kind of information that I may come across? But not only that, a further step, which I have also discussed with His Excellency, a further step that came into my mind was that if the yardstick is the Quran, and this is my position, that the yardstick is the Quran, and I'm making a comparison with everything that is available in all the sciences, the way it is understood today, whether it's the soft sciences or the hard sciences, whatever it may be, the issue that has arisen is a very simple one. The ultimate yardstick for which everything should go back to is the Quran. The Quran not only mentions all these particular aspects of the subject matter that are studied in all the universities and colleges around the world, but it also goes a bit further than that, and it gives us information which yet has to be not only discovered, but established experimentally. Now, that is a whole new subject, which inshallah I will be attending to. But in terms of how I have arrived at the way I have, the stages that started came back to one thing only and one thing, that being evidence. Evidence has been provided. I will come across the evidence. The first thing I will want to do is look at the yardstick and see if there's an indication in the yardstick, which there will be. That indication tells me, okay, how I must be approaching the subject matter. So just a quick example I will give, without wanting to be controversial. There was a dear friend of mine, and he told me that his children had decided that they just wanted to leave Islam. So I said to him, I said, look, don't worry. What is it that they are asking? Now, sometimes you have to understand the person, and you have to also understand the level of understanding that they may possess, and you have to take it forward. So when I was, this was a serious concern for the parent. So I told him, look, it's not that much of an issue, okay? So he arranged a meeting with them, and I sat down with them, and the thing that they approached, the issues that were being bothersome to them, were to do with psychology and how we understand things. So the lady, the daughter, her issue was what was wrong with homosexuality. And his son's issue was, if the Creator knows everything, what is the point? Now, you see, they are actually complete opposites of how the person is understanding their own life and life around them. So I'm looking at it from the yardstick perspective, and I know that, look, there seems to be a fundamental misunderstanding in the way they are thinking. However, how have they arrived at the thinking process was also an issue that needed to be considered. So if you are going to talk to someone, for me, the way I had been viewing things, I would need to know exactly what their psychology is actually telling them, the way we understand the word psychology today. So I told his daughter, I said, look, what we need to do perhaps is leave the creator out of the equation totally. Let's take the creator out. Now let's look at the natural surroundings and let's establish how we have arrived where we have arrived today. If we were going to say that the theory of evolution, the way the word theory is understood in the scientific context, if we understand it to be the case, then it is the only alternative, the logical alternative at this point in time, which suggests to us the origin of life. So I said to the daughter, I said, look, if I were to ask you now, if natural selection being a mechanism decided, now the words I'm employing here are already suggesting that there is intelligence behind it, but that is for the purposes of understanding, yeah? I said, if natural selection decided that the most appropriate and natural way for the succession of life or living entities, including the human beings, was the interaction between a male and a female, otherwise we wouldn't be where we are. Apart from these other aspects of, what we would call the generation of beings through whether it is asexual or parthenogenesis, etc. But the natural aspect is for the interaction of the male and the female. That would be the natural way. So I told her, I said, look, if I were to consider this issue in that manner, anything other than that, would we consider it to be natural? Again, understanding what the definition of the word natural is. And so the approach was, okay, we don't have a creator, no problem. How do we understand and accept how we have arrived at where we have arrived? And if that is the primary method that has been employed by natural selection, then one has to question the validity of any other aspect of interaction, which has to now be forced into the definition of natural. And so the same thing with the sun. It's all about the evidence, and it's all about how one is going to approach. So when the sun says, if the creator knows everything, what is the point? Now, again, the psychology of the individual has to be considered using the yardstick, being the Quran. So I said to him, I said, look, let me give you an example. If you were accused of murder and you had the choice of two judges, one judge had partial information about the case, and the other judge had all the total evidence that is required for your case, which one would you choose? Now, he naturally said, obviously, the one who possesses all the information. So I said, well, if that is so logical, I mean, if we take the definition of what a creator is, then it is totally illogical to even suggest remotely that the creator would be a creator without knowing certain things. So again, this method, it takes a few minutes, but it all stemmed from all those steps that I had to take to establish the method that I was going to employ. And you know what, my brothers and sisters, Alhamdulillah, I will say one thing, and I say this in sincerity, as Allah is my witness, that the method that I have adopted is the most effective that I have seen so far. So, to me, I want to actually not only take it further with the help of other brothers and sisters who are great thinkers in their own right, but it is with a view to actually opening up this whole, when I talk about the Quran being guidance, I am talking about the Quran, if appropriately used today, can bring us to the cusp of a major thinking revolution, and also what I would call a scientific revolution. What I mean by that is that if I give a quick example, which I usually use, is when we are told in the Quran that Sulaiman alayhi salam was in a meeting, and in this meeting, he is talking about Bilqis coming. He then says to his companions there in the meeting, can somebody bring her throne over? And we have an Ifrit saying, yes, I can do it before the meeting is over. And he is told that, no, that's not fast enough. I would start thinking, wait a minute, why is it not fast enough? As we know, she wasn't immediately appearing. So what is the reason, the wisdom behind why Sulaiman alayhi salam said what he said? Then we have somebody else who then says to Sulaiman, you know what, I am able to do it in the blink of an eye, and he did it. However, the imperative aspect for me, the important aspect for me was what was said about this individual. It says, and the one who possessed the knowledge, the one who possessed the necessary information to be able to do what he did. For me, a lot of people will say to me, and I don't want to sound controversial, in the context, people said to me, but that was a miracle of the Creator. My humble suggestion is that what we may have to do is perhaps reconsider what the statement is actually saying. If it is saying the one who possessed knowledge, he was able to do it. The question I'm asking is that knowledge still available? If it is available, how can we acquire it? Is there a possibility that we have the ability to acquire that knowledge? Having done a further reading on it, I can humbly submit that yes, there is. Now, why do I say this? Because I am looking at the Quran as guidance in totality for the benefit of human beings on earth and wherever else. But the central point being that the Creator has not left anything from the guidance that has been provided to us for our benefit. And if I take that further, I notice that we are making strides. And when I say we, I'm talking collectively, Muslim or otherwise, anyone in the field of research, technology, etc. Because for me, my view is that the word science, the way it is understood today, needs to be overturned. And it needs to be understood that when we use the word science, we mean knowledge, and knowledge can be applied to any aspect that we are trying to understand. So I find that there are many, many what we would call scientific aspects in the Quran which yet need to be discovered. What is it that the Creator is actually, the word ayah tells us it's a sign, yeah? What is that signature that we are supposed to extract from it? But in order to do that, we will have to first and foremost establish within ourselves the notion and the primary notion of evidence being the imperative aspect for us, from which we can then glean. And one more thing before I come to an end, I will also say, while I was progressing in all that I was thinking and how to approach, I also came to the realization that we as Muslims in the whole of the Muslim world, and I did say primarily I'm looking at it from the Islamic perspective, we in the Muslim world need to start understanding, and alhamdulillah, I think it is going that way. We need to start adopting the ability to be able to respect the opinion of somebody, even though that opinion may be what we would consider to be a minority opinion. Yeah, we need to start understanding as Muslims that the Quran is the focal point, it is the yardstick. We need to start extracting information from it, not from, as I said at the start, from a religious perspective, because the very word religion needs to be reconsidered, but from the perspective of the Quran being guidance. You know, if I came to our respected Dr. Jassim in his particular field, and I sought some information from him, okay, he will guide me according to his best ability. I am going to know that I am going to trust what Dr. Jassim is going to say to me. That trust element is what needs to be now extended within the Muslim mindset between the Muslim and what the Creator has informed us about. Now, when we go in the search of all this, we are bound to make errors, we are bound to make mistakes, but our concentration should be on the end goal, what we are going to get at the end of it. So we need to extract all this information. This is one of the reasons why the way the method as I have approached has told me now that the first and most important thing is to acquire the necessary evidence wherever the evidence may be. So over all the many years, my process took me from trying to understand why I'm here, then looking at all the different religions again, seeing what it was all about, then arriving at a particular stance that there has to be, for me, logically, something by which I can measure everything. And that I found from an evidential perspective to be the Quran. But when I took that a bit further, I realized the Quran is constantly talking about considering evidence first and foremost, and then formulating conclusions, reasonable ones based on the evidence. That then took me further to understand that the very nature of the way we look at information is primarily based on an interpretive element from the Western world, which sometimes was actually conflicting with the way we took our position as Muslims in relation to what Islam said. So it was a process that took me step by step to where now I've come to the conclusion that the Creator is giving us unbelievable information, which we need to extract from it. But in order to do that, we are going to have to rely on the evidence on an objective basis, and also be prepared to take on minority opinions, because they may have an element which has not been considered by the majority, which when put together can give us a full story. And that is how I have come to the way I have started employing this method. First, it should be evidence, then you should have a logical assessment, and thereafter formulate a conclusion. Jazakallah.
Thank you very much.
I think I've spoken enough.
No, that's less than what we are actually. We are waiting for a lot of things, but the time is bounding us.
Absolutely.
Thanks very much, actually, for this intellectual talk.
And
we will take, inshallah, 3 questions from the brothers around.
Yeah.
And then we will end the session. But that will mean not the last time we see you, actually. We would like to see you again and again.
Inshallah, inshallah. Yeah, sure.
Brother and sister, is there any questions for Dr. Shabir? Welcome. It seems they either they run away or they are thinking about the subject.
That's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking, this is everybody. That's the whole one. What's he talking about? They're gone.
Alaikum salam.
Hello, my name is Dalal Mullah and I'm from Qatar.
Hi.
Hello, Dr. Shabir. Thank you, Dr. Shabir, and thank you, Dr. Johnson, for the beautiful speech. And I think it might come to my mind one question, actually.
Sure.
Like when you said, Dr. Shabir, that in order to analyze what the Quran is saying and understand the way God meant it to be understood, we have to look at it from our own perspective and from our own mind, like rather than going back to what Western words is giving you as facts.
Yeah.
Like related to nature, related to the creating, rather than going back to that as facts and as science, go back to Quran and do your own research. So I would like you to just talk further about that, please.
Not a problem. Yeah. To me, if you look at many aspects, and I did rely on the psychology aspect of it, you find that there are many things that we are told, and when we look at what the yardstick says, i.e. the Quran, okay, it seems to be a bit different. However, what I said, look, if we use evidence as the primary source, wherever that evidence may be from, okay, we know, as I said earlier on, there are aspects which, when we look at what the Quran says, don't seem to fit with what has been discovered. Yeah, I mean, the Quran makes it very clear to us that we, the Creator, is going to make us, humanity as a whole, going to look on the horizons and within ourselves until it is manifest to us that this is the truth. Now, obviously, knowledge is free. Everybody has got it. If, for example, I take physics as a subject, sister, you find that there are discoveries that are made which can be tested, retested, and it can be established to be a fact. Not a problem. If you are to take certain aspects of psychology and you realize, wait a minute, what is he talking about? And I use the example of the Oedipus complex. Yeah, I'm sure you'll familiarize yourself with it. When you look at that and you think, wait a minute, what does Islam? Islam is not in any way even suggesting something remotely like that. What is it actually saying? And if it is saying something, how are we going to be able to do that independent research if our reliance is going to be on what was previously said? However, that does not mean that looking at that information, for us sometimes to actually know where we may be going right, or more importantly, where they are going wrong, we would need that information. So, but the primary, and as you rightly pointed out, sister, to me, if the Quran is mentioning things, and the one I mentioned about Suleiman, yeah, if the Quran is mentioning certain things which at this moment in time have not even been considered, yeah, not in detail, then it should fall on us to actually develop, whether it's research facilities, develop centers where this further research can take place. You know, one of the major issues I will tell you, Sister Dalal, about this is that if I were to say, I want to do some research and I want a grant for the research, and I apply to all these organizations that provide the funding, and I say, I'm going to be using a statement from the Quran to establish the research, I can guarantee you 100% no one is going to provide the research, the funding.
Absolutely.
You know why? Because their automatic association is going to be, this is religious, not interested. Mm-hmm. So now we have to think, if, for example, if I quickly take the example of the young people in the cave who slept for 300 odd years. Now, for me, that is an example to use, and consider this element, sister. They were turning this way, sleep, they woke up. The question that ought to be asked is, were their vital functions in full operation? Well, the answer has to be yes, if you look at what the statement says in the Quran. What research can we actually undertake? First and foremost, we would have to look at that full issue and try and formulate questions as to what, how, if, etc. But if I were to say, as I said earlier on, if I were to say, look, this is the research that needs to be undertaken, no one is going to give the funding. Absolutely no one. Because again, as I touched on it, there is this idea that the mindset has actually undertaken of this being religion, that being religious, this being non-religious, this being scientific. Now, if I were to take those very same statements from the Quran, Sister Dalal, and I were to formulate them in what we understand to be the scientific context and use wording that is scientific, what do you think the likely result is going to be for the funding?
No one will pay any single attention to what you're saying, well, and no one will take it seriously.
Exactly. But now I will take that same thing that I am saying and use scientific words. Do not mention the Quran as the Quran. Yeah, I'm just telling you what, because the way I have formulated it, alhamdulillah, you know what, I opened up the Brain Academy, okay? It is to consider these very issues, and you know how I'm talking about. If I say to you, the person was sleeping, yeah? The person was sleeping in a cave. He slept for 100 odd years, yeah? Now, the first thing that I would say to you, Sister Dalal, is that a cave is very cold. And when you are cold, what happens to the body systems? Yeah, you will note that they start shutting down slowly. But there is a method which a lot of people who do a lot of yoga, etc., yeah, who slow down their breathing to such an extent that they can prolong themselves, whether it is in water, wherever. But the point being is that if they were asleep, their bodily functions were all operational. Yeah. Today, we know that there is a special scientific aspect of study which is to do with cold temperatures and the body. The question is it possible that when they were in the cave, the whole atmosphere there was extremely cold? Oh, well, okay, it can be cold for 1 day, 2 days, 10 months, but 100 odd years? Something took place. Now, we will usually say it's a mu'jiza. It is a miracle. I don't view it that way. The way I'm viewing everything from the Quranic perspective is that it is guidance, and our understanding of knowledge, we will call it scientific understanding, is constantly improving and increasing, and certain subject matter which is contained in the Quran, sister, as I said, the example, if we were to start highlighting it as a research area, the whole of the world, pretty much 99.9%, will dismiss it. Why? Because it has its basis, its origin in the Quran. But that is simply because my view is, sister, that is simply because the Quran is being seen in a manner that it should not be seen. In other words, it is not, and I'm prepared to challenge anybody on this, yeah? The Quran is not a religious text. That's the first thing we need to take out of our minds. If we consider it to be a religious text, the way the word religion is understood, everybody will disagree with me. However, if you look at the evidence within the Quran, how it is actually viewing matters, you will find it does not fit with the word religion. And if that be the case, then logic is dictating to me that however the Quran or the guidance tells us we should view the guidance, then that is the appropriate way to view the guidance, not the way the rest of the world has imposed on it, if you are following what I'm saying. So when it comes to the research facilities, pretty much everything is actually using the Western methods, yeah? Now, like I said, I don't wholesale disregard anything. To me, the Creator has made it very clear knowledge can be obtained from all over. But that knowledge, once it is extracted, is it fitting with the narrative that is contained in the Quran? That is not an easy task, but it can be done. So to your question, yes, what I am saying is, look, we need to start considering developing research facilities to actually look at what the Quran is actually saying, excuse me, from the scientific perspective. Excuse me. So to me, yes, there is a possibility we need to start considering perhaps of opening research facilities where we look at the statements contained in the Quran from a scientific perspective, the way I'm understanding the word science in the context of knowledge. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you very much. I think we have reached the time, the proper
Already?
time, and we are looking forward actually to see you again. Probably, inshallah, we will see you in London again.
Inshallah, inshallah.
Soon, inshallah. Thanks very much actually for your presence and for this presentation. And I think most of the people have got very good information about the topics you are interested in, and they will share a lot of information with you later on.
Inshallah. And if there's
Thanks
anything, Anything, Dr. Jasim, inshallah, drop me a line.
إن شاء الله عز وجل. السلام عليكم.
Wa alaikum salam.